There are moments in life when walking away feels like the safest choice, when staying means risking everything you've carefully built to protect yourself. Adrian Blake stood at that exact crossroad in a quiet cafe on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, seconds away from leaving, convinced he was making the right decision. He had no idea that the muddy, barefoot woman about to crash through that door would shatter every wall he'd spent years constructing, or that choosing to stay for just one more minute would become the most terrifying, life-altering decision he'd ever make. If you want to see how one chaotic encounter can destroy a man's carefully controlled world and rebuild it into something he never imagined possible, stay with me until the end. And hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Adrian Blake's life operated on a system so precise it could have been programmed by a machine. Every morning began at 5:47 a.m., not 5:45, not 5:50, but 5:47, because that gave him exactly 13 minutes to shower, 8 minutes to dress, and 12 minutes to prepare his daughter Mia's breakfast before she woke at 6:20. The routine never varied. Variation meant chaos, and chaos meant vulnerability. And vulnerability was something Adrian had systematically eliminated from his existence 6 years ago. On this particular Tuesday morning, everything ran according to schedule until his sister Laura cornered him in his own kitchen. "You're going," she said, blocking the refrigerator with her body. "I already confirmed you'd be there. Laura, I have Mia's parent-teacher conference at 4, grocery shopping at 5:15, and a blind date at 3 o'clock that I set up 3 weeks ago." Laura crossed her arms. "You know what your problem is, Adrian? You've turned into a robot. A really boring, lonely robot who's going to wake up at 50 and realize he spent his entire life color-coding his daughter's school supplies." Adrian didn't take the bait. He reached around her for the milk and didn't, his expression unchanging. "I'm not lonely. I have Mia. I have my work. I have a calendar that would make a military general weep with envy." "Yeah, I've seen it." Laura softened her voice. "Adrian, it's been 6 years since Rebecca left. 6 years. Mia was 2. She's 8 now, and she's starting to notice that her dad doesn't have a life outside of being her dad." "That's not true." "Really? Name one thing you did last month that wasn't related to Mia, work, or maintaining this house." Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it. Laura waited. "Exactly," she said quietly. "1 hour, 1 coffee. That's all I'm asking. If it's terrible, you leave. But you owe it to yourself to at least try." What Adrian wanted to say was that he didn't owe himself anything, that trying had gotten him Rebecca, beautiful, impulsive Rebecca who'd promised forever and delivered 18 months before deciding that motherhood was suffocating her spirit and marriage was incompatible with her authentic self. She'd left on a Tuesday morning, much like this one, with 2 suitcases and a note that said she needed to find herself in Portland. Last he'd heard, she was engaged to a yoga instructor and hadn't asked about Mia in 4 years. So no, he didn't owe himself the opportunity to experience that particular brand of devastation again. But Laura was still standing there, and his sister had spent the better part of their childhood protecting him from their alcoholic father's worst moments. He owed her. "Fine," he said. 1 hour. "That's my brother." Laura beamed. "Her name's Victoria. She's successful, smart, and according to my friend who knows her, she's intimidatingly beautiful, but somehow not annoying about it, which is high praise." "Great. Sounds terrifying." 3 o'clock, Riverside Cafe. "Wear the blue shirt. It makes you look less like you're about to audit someone's taxes." Adrian wore the blue shirt. He also wore his usual expression of mild resignation as he walked into Riverside Cafe at 2:58 p.m., scanning the interior for a woman who might be Victoria. The cafe was half empty, filled with the usual Tuesday afternoon crowd. College students with laptops, a handful of remote workers, an elderly couple sharing a scone. No one who looked like they were waiting for a blind date. Adrian claimed a corner table with a clear view of the entrance and checked his watch. 2:59. He'd give this exactly 60 minutes, maintain polite conversation, and then return to his regularly scheduled life. His phone buzzed, a reminder about Mia's conference. He silenced it and waited. 3 o'clock came and went. Then 3:05. At 3:10, Adrian started composing a text to Laura. She didn't show. I waited. "Can we consider this fulfilled?" He didn't send it. Laura would just argue that 10 minutes wasn't really waiting, the traffic existed, that he was looking for excuses, which was fair because he absolutely was looking for excuses. 3:15. Adrian ordered a coffee from a server who looked sympathetic in that pitying way that suggested she'd seen many people get stood up at this cafe. He thanked her and pretended to check his email while actually calculating whether leaving at 3:20 would seem unreasonable. 15 minutes past the agreed time felt like a solid cutoff. Polite, but not desperate. 3:18. He was gathering his jacket when the cafe door burst open with enough force to make everyone look up. The woman who stumbled through it was, objectively speaking, a disaster. Her hair, dark, shoulder length, probably expensive when it had been styled that morning, hung in muddy tangles around her face. Her white blouse, or what had once been a white blouse, was now various shades of brown and green, clinging to her in wet patches. She'd lost her shoes somewhere. Her bare feet left actual mud prints on the cafe's tile floor. A nasty scrape ran down her left shin, still bleeding slightly. She looked like she'd either survived a natural disaster or lost a fight with a swamp, and she was walking directly toward Adrian's table. "Adrian Blake?" she asked, slightly breathless. He stared at her. "Yes?" "Victoria Hale. She gestured vaguely at herself. "Late, obviously." This was Victoria. Laura's intimidatingly beautiful friend was currently dripping pond water onto his shoes. "I can see that," Adrian said, because his brain had apparently decided that Captain Obvious was the appropriate persona for this situation. "I'm so sorry. I know how this looks." Victoria pushed wet hair off her forehead, leaving a streak of mud in its place. "I was 10 minutes away, completely on time, when I saw this golden retriever trapped in that retention pond off Riverside Drive. The poor thing had chased a duck or something and gotten stuck in the mud. There was no one else around, and I couldn't just—" She stopped, seeming to realize she was rambling. "I tried to pull him out." "I can see that too," Adrian repeated, still processing. His owner showed up eventually and got him loose. Sweet old man, absolutely mortified. Kept apologizing while his dog shook muddy water all over both of us. She laughed, actually laughed, at what had to be the worst blind date entrance in recorded history. "Anyway, I'm here now. Still interested in coffee, or should I just leave and let you report back to Laura that her matchmaking skills are questionable?" Adrian should have let her leave. Every instinct he possessed was screaming that this woman represented chaos, unpredictability, the exact opposite of everything he'd built his life around. Women who showed up to first dates covered in pond mud were not women who respected schedules, boundaries, or the kind of careful emotional distance he required. But she was still standing there, bedraggled and bleeding and apparently unfazed by any of it. And something about her complete lack of embarrassment made him curious. "I'll get you some napkins," he heard himself say. Victoria's smile transformed her face. "That would be amazing. Thank you." Adrian flagged down the same sympathetic server, who took one look at Victoria and hurried off, returning with a stack of napkins and a first aid kit that suggested Riverside Cafe had seen its share of emergencies. "You're bleeding," Adrian said, pointing at her shin. "Am I?" Victoria glanced down. "Oh, yeah, there were some branches in the pond. I didn't feel it happen." She sat down across from him and started wiping mud off her arms with the napkins, methodical and efficient. "I used to be a paramedic before other things. Occupational hazard, you stop noticing minor injuries." "You were a paramedic?" That didn't match Laura's description of successful businesswoman. "Bao si is." "Years ago, different life." Victoria cleaned the scrape on her leg without flinching. "What about you? Laura mentioned you work in finance. Risk assessment for a consulting firm." "Risk assessment." Victoria's eyes, gray, he noticed, or maybe green depending on the light, held something that might have been amusement. "That explains the expression you had when I walked in. You were calculating exactly how much of a disaster I represent." She wasn't wrong. Adrian felt exposed in a way that was deeply uncomfortable. "I wasn't," he started. "You absolutely were. It's fine. I am objectively a disaster right now." She finished with the napkins and looked at him directly. "So here's what I'm thinking. I clearly can't sit here like this. I'm violating probably 6 health codes. Give me 10 minutes to run to my car and change into the emergency outfit I keep in my trunk, and then we can start this over properly. Or, if you'd rather cut your losses and leave, I completely understand. No hard feelings either way. Adrian checked his watch without thinking. 3:24 p.m. If he left now, he'd make the parent-teacher conference early, maybe have time to prep his questions for Mia's teacher. The smart choice was obvious. 10 minutes, he said. Victoria's smile returned. Thank you. I promise I clean up okay. She stood, paused. Also, for what it's worth, the dog is fine. His name is Biscuit, and he's going to have a very pampered evening after his adventure. Then she was gone, leaving wet footprints and a small pile of muddy napkins. Adrian sat alone, wondering what he'd just agreed to. The server approached, coffee pot in hand. Refill? She asked. Please. She seems nice, the server offered. Different, but nice. Different is one word for it. My grandmother used to say that the right people show up at exactly the wrong time in exactly the wrong way. She poured his coffee. Something about how if everything was perfect, you'd never know if they were real. Adrian thanked her and tried not to think about that as he waited. He checked his email, responded to 2 work messages, reviewed his notes for Mia's conference, waited some more. At 3:32, Victoria returned. The transformation was remarkable. She wore dark jeans and a simple gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Minimal makeup, or maybe she just had good skin. She'd cleaned the scrape on her leg properly, covered it with a bandage from what must have been a very well-stocked emergency kit. She looked like exactly the kind of successful, put-together woman Laura had described, which somehow made the previous version feel like a fever dream. Better? Victoria asked, sliding into the seat across from him. Drier, Adrian said. She laughed. It was a genuine sound, unself-conscious. Fair. I really am sorry about all that. Not exactly the first impression I was planning. What were you planning? See, honestly, I was going to show up exactly on time wearing my lucky blazer and pretend to be a normal, well-adjusted person for at least 45 minutes before you figured out I'm kind of a mess. She accepted a menu from the approaching server with a thank you. But then Biscuit happened, and I figured there was no point in false advertising. You don't strike me as a mess. That's because you have very low standards after watching me squeeze pond water out of my hair. Victoria studied the menu. What's good here? I don't know. First time. Yum. Same. She looked up. Want to split something completely inadvisable? Those loaded nachos sound deeply unhealthy and therefore perfect. Adrian had eaten exactly 1 meal this week that wasn't carefully portioned and nutritionally balanced. Last Friday's pizza with Mia, which had been planned as her reward for a good report card. Sure, he said. They ordered. The nachos arrived, absurd and enormous. Victoria immediately grabbed one dripping with cheese and jalapenos. So, she said, Laura probably told you exactly nothing useful about me, which means I should probably explain the whole CEO thing before you Google me and get the weird version. You're a CEO of Hale Innovations. We do medical technology, primarily diagnostic equipment for underserved markets. Started it 6 years ago after I left emergency medicine. She saw his expression. Yeah, I know. Paramedic to billionaire CEO is quite the jump. There's a whole story there involving my father's death, an inheritance I didn't want, and a lot of angry phone calls with venture capitalists who thought I was too young and too female to know what I was doing. But you did. I did. Turns out grief and spite are excellent motivators. Victoria took another nacho. Your turn. Laura said you have a daughter? Here it was. The moment where most people either got weird or got uncomfortable. Adrian had developed a practiced way of discussing Mia that didn't invite follow-up questions. Mia, she's 8. Smart, funny, obsessed with marine biology, even though we live 6 hours from the nearest ocean. Just you and her? Yes. Victoria waited like she expected more. When Adrian didn't offer it, she didn't push. That must be hard, she said instead. Single parenting. It's fine. Is it? The question was gentle but direct, and Adrian found himself answering honestly despite his better judgment. No, it's exhausting and terrifying, and I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. But it's also the only thing I'm certain about. He paused. That probably sounds real, Victoria finished. It sounds real. Thank you for not giving me the sanitized version. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment. The cafe hummed around them. Conversation, laughter, the hiss of the espresso machine. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. And you can tell me it's none of my business. Okay? Did you actually want to be here today? Or did Laura bully you into it? Adrian could have lied, should have lied. Instead, Laura cornered me in my kitchen this morning and told me I'd turned into a boring, lonely robot. Ouch! She wasn't wrong. Were you lonely? Victoria asked. Before this? I don't know. I was busy. There's a difference, I think. There is. Victoria studied him with an intensity that made Adrian want to look away. You know what I think? I think you're someone who got hurt badly and decided that the solution was perfect control. Am I close? You sound like a therapist. I dated one once, picked up some of the vocabulary. She smiled. You don't have to answer. I'm being nosy. Occupational hazard of running a company. I ask too many questions. But Adrian found he wanted to answer. Maybe it was the way Victoria had shown up covered in mud and hadn't pretended it was anything other than what it was. Maybe it was because she'd shared something real about herself first. Maybe he was just tired of holding everything so tightly. My ex-wife left when Mia was 2, he said. No warning, no discussion. Just gone one morning. I came home from a business trip and found a note. I'm sorry. The note said she needed to find herself, that being a mother and wife was preventing her from living authentically. Adrian heard the bitterness in his own voice. She's in Portland now, engaged, happy, presumably. She hasn't asked about Mia in years. But you're not angry about that. It wasn't a question. Adrian looked at Victoria, surprised. How did you... Oh! Because if you were angry, you would have led with that. Instead, you led with no warning, no discussion. You're not mad she left. You're mad she didn't give you a chance to fix it. Victoria's expression was understanding without being pitying. You're someone who solves problems, and she didn't let you solve that one. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. Some small, sealed room he'd forgotten was there. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, that's exactly it. So you decided that if you could control everything else, every variable, every risk, then nothing could surprise you like that again. You really did date a therapist. For 3 years. She was very insightful and also completely wrong for me, which she pointed out repeatedly before I finally listened. Victoria reached for another nacho, then stopped. Okay, reached for, I'm doing the thing where I psychoanalyze someone I just met, and it's probably annoying. Tell me about Mia instead. What's she like? Adrian could talk about Mia. That was safe territory, except when he started describing his daughter. Her obsession with ocean documentaries, the way she organized her stuffed animals by species, her habit of asking questions that made him realize how little he actually knew about the world, something shifted. Victoria didn't just listen politely. She engaged, asked follow-up questions, laughed at his stories. She sounds incredible, Victoria said when he'd finished recounting Mia's recent attempt to turn their bathtub into a tidal pool ecosystem. And terrifying, in the best way. She is. Does she know you're here? On a date? No, I told her I had a work meeting. Why? Good question. Adrian considered it. Because if I told her and it went badly, she'd be disappointed. Or worse, she'd try to make me feel better about it. She already worries about me too much. She's 8. I know. And she worries about you. I know, Adrian repeated, quieter. Victoria's expression shifted to something sadder. You know that's not how it's supposed to work, right? You're supposed to be the one who worries about her. I do worry about her, constantly. But you also let her worry about you, which means she's learned that your happiness is her responsibility. Victoria held up a hand before Adrian could protest. I'm not judging, I'm really not. Or, but I watched my mother do the same thing after my dad died. She turned into this martyr figure who sacrificed everything for me and my brother, and it took me years of therapy to realize that her misery had become our burden. We were kids trying to manage our mother's emotional state instead of just being kids. The words hit harder than Adrian expected. He thought about Mia's careful questions about his day, the way she sometimes brought him drawings to make him smile, her recent insistence on helping with dinner, even though she was barely tall enough to reach the counter safely. I don't know how to be any different, he admitted. You could start by letting yourself want things. For you, not for her. Like what? I don't know. What did you want before you became the guy whose whole identity is being Mia's dad? Adrian tried to remember. Before Rebecca, before Mia, before the carefully constructed routine that kept everything manageable, who had he been? I wanted to write, he said, surprising himself. Not professionally, just I used to keep journals, observations about people, places, nothing important. When did you stop? When Mia was born. There wasn't time. Or you decided there wasn't time. There's a difference. Victoria finished her coffee. What else? I liked hiking, photography. I had this whole plan to visit every national park before I turned 40. How many have you done? 3, all before Mia. What else? Why does it matter? Because you're sitting here telling me you're fine, living a life where you've eliminated every single thing that made you happy except your daughter. And that's not sustainable, Adrian. Eventually it's going to break something. Maybe you, maybe her, maybe both. You don't know that. I don't, Victoria agreed. But I know what it looks like when someone decides that control equals safety. I did it myself after my dad died. Built a company, worked 90-hour weeks, convinced myself that if I could just succeed hard enough, I wouldn't have to feel anything else. Know what happened? What? I ended up in the ER at 30 with stress-induced heart palpitations that my doctors thought might be a heart attack. Turned out I'd spent so much time managing my company that I'd forgotten to manage my life. She smiled without humor. That was my wake-up call. Took another year of therapy and a lot of difficult conversations to actually change anything, but I got there. Adrian absorbed this. The cafe had grown busier around them. He hadn't noticed. He checked his watch, 4:17. He'd missed the start of Mia's parent-teacher conference. Panic flared immediately. He started reaching for his phone to call the school, to apologize, to reschedule. What is it? Victoria asked. I'm supposed to be at my daughter's school. The conference started at 4. Can you call them? Mom, yes, I'll reschedule. I just need to. He was already pulling up the number, his hands moving on autopilot. Adrian, Victoria's voice cut through his rising anxiety. Stop. He stopped. Take a breath, she said. You're not having an emergency. You're late to an appointment. That's all. It happens to everyone. Not to me. I know. That's the problem. Victoria reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her palm. Call the school. Explain you got held up. They'll reschedule. Mia will be fine. This is not a catastrophe. Adrian wanted to argue, to explain that she didn't understand how things could unravel if you weren't careful, how one missed appointment could cascade into missed homework, could cascade into missed opportunities, could cascade into... You're spiraling, Victoria observed. I can see it happening. Whatever story you're telling yourself about what this means, it's not true. You don't know that. You're right. But I know that beating yourself up for being late to one conference isn't going to help Mia. Making the call will. So make the call. Adrian made the call. The receptionist was understanding, apologetic even, as if he was the one doing them a favor by rescheduling. They set a new time for Thursday. It took 3 minutes. When he hung up, Victoria was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Better? She asked. I hate this, Adrian said. What? Feeling like I'm failing, even at small things. You're not failing. You're human. There's a difference. Victoria leaned back in her chair. You want to know what I think? And again, you can tell me I'm overstepping. What do you think? I think you're terrified that if you're not perfect, something terrible will happen. Like the universe is just waiting for you to slip up so it can take everything away. She paused. But here's the thing. You already had something terrible happen. Your wife left, and you survived it. You and Mia both survived it. So maybe what you're actually afraid of isn't failure. Maybe you're afraid that you'll discover you can be imperfect and still be okay. That doesn't make sense, doesn't it? Because if you can be imperfect and still be okay, then you spent 6 years living in a cage you built for yourself for no reason. Adrian felt the truth of it like a physical blow. He wanted to argue, to defend his choices, to explain that Victoria didn't understand, except she clearly did understand, maybe better than he understood himself. "I should go," he said, standing abruptly. Thank you for meeting me, but I should—" "You're running," Victoria said calmly, "which is fine. You're allowed to run, but at least be honest about what you're running from." "I'm not running. I have things to do. Mia gets home from her friend's house at 5:30, and I need to— It's 4:23. That's over an hour from now." Adrian stopped. She was right. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Doing what?" "Pushing. You don't know me. We've been talking for less than an hour." "Closer to 2, actually, but who's counting?" Victoria's smile was gentle. "I'm pushing because Laura told me you were worth knowing, and because in the last 90 minutes I've seen exactly what she meant. You're smart. You clearly love your daughter more than anything, and you're so desperately afraid of being hurt again that you've turned yourself into someone who can't be touched. And that's sad, Adrian. Not because you're pathetic or weak, but because you deserve better." "You don't know what I deserve." "You're right, I don't." Victoria stood, gathering her jacket. "But I know what you're choosing right now, which is safety over everything else. And that's your call to make. I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise." She was leaving. Adrian should have felt relieved. This was exactly what he'd wanted, an exit, a return to normal, confirmation that his instincts about avoiding this whole situation had been correct. Instead, he felt something closer to regret. "Victoria," he said. She turned back. "I'm sorry," Adrian said, "for being a human person with trauma and defense mechanisms. Don't apologize for that." Victoria's expression softened. "Look, I'll be honest. I went into this expecting exactly what you probably expected. An awkward hour, some polite conversation, mutual agreement that we're not compatible, everyone goes home. But then you turned out to be interesting. And I like interesting. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you my number. If you decide you want to continue this conversation, and by this conversation I mean the messy, uncomfortable one where we're both honest instead of polite, you can call me. If you don't, that's okay too. No hard feelings." She pulled a business card from her wallet, wrote something on the back, and handed it to him. Adrian took it automatically. "Cell number's on the back," she said. "The front is just my work info, which you can Google if you want to verify I'm not a con artist posing as a CEO." "I don't think you're a con artist." "Good, because I'm really not. I'm just someone who showed up to a blind date covered in pond mud and discovered that maybe the guy on the other side of the table is exactly the kind of disaster I didn't know I was looking for." Victoria moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Adrian, for what it's worth, I think you're a really good dad. The kind who worries too much and tries too hard and loves too deeply. Mia's lucky to have you. I just hope you eventually realize that being a good dad doesn't mean you have to stop being a person." Then she was gone. Adrian stood alone in the cafe, Victoria's business card in his hand, feeling like he'd just survived something he couldn't quite name. The server approached with the check. "Your friend left," she observed unnecessarily. "Yeah. You gonna call her?" "I don't know. My grandmother also used to say that the right people show up to teach us what we need to learn. Sometimes the lesson is uncomfortable." The server smiled. "But usually it's worth it." Adrian paid, left a generous tip, and walked to his car. He had 45 minutes before he needed to pick up Mia. Normally he'd use that time to run errands, check emails, accomplish something measurable. Instead, he sat in his car and stared at Victoria's business card. Hale Innovations. Victoria Hale, CEO. On the back, in neat handwriting, a phone number and a single sentence. For when you're ready to stop running, Adrian tucked the card into his wallet and drove home, where he would pick up his daughter, make dinner, help with homework, follow the routine that kept everything safe and managed and predictable. But for the first time in 6 years, a small part of him wondered what might happen if he didn't. 3 days passed before Adrian looked at the business card again. It sat in his wallet, tucked behind his driver's license, a small rectangle of potential chaos that he actively ignored while going through the motions of his carefully structured life. He picked up Mia, made dinners, attended the rescheduled parent-teacher conference where Mrs. Patterson praised his daughter's academic performance and gently suggested she might benefit from more social activities outside school. He nodded, took notes, promised to look into options, and filed the conversation away under things to address when schedules permit. Thursday evening found him doing dishes while Mia worked on a poster about coral reefs at the kitchen table, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration as she glued cut-out fish onto blue construction paper. "Dad?" she said without looking up. "Yeah, Bug." "Are you mad at Aunt Laura?" Adrian's hand stilled in the soapy water. "What? No. Why would you think that?" "Because she called twice today and you didn't answer." Mia added another fish to her reef, adjusting its position with careful precision. "You always answer when Aunt Laura calls." She wasn't wrong. Adrian had seen Laura's name on his screen both times and let it go to voicemail. He knew exactly what his sister wanted: a debrief on the date, details he wasn't ready to articulate, questions he didn't have answers for. "I've been busy," he said, which was technically true and completely insufficient. "Doing what?" "Work stuff." Mia made a non-committal sound that suggested she didn't believe him but wasn't going to push. She'd learned that skill from him. Adrian realized with an uncomfortable jolt how to recognize when someone was deflecting and politely allow it. 8 years old and already managing his emotional evasions. Victoria's words came back to him unbidden. "She worries about you too much." "Actually," Adrian said, drying his hands on a towel, "I wasn't busy. I just wasn't ready to talk to her yet." Mia looked up, surprised by his honesty. "Why not?" "Because she's going to ask me about something I don't know how to explain." "What thing?" Adrian sat down across from his daughter, watching her arrange tiny paper starfish with the same methodical care he applied to everything in his own life. Where had she learned that? Had he taught her to be this careful, this controlled? Or had she absorbed it by osmosis, watching him treat life like a series of risks to be managed rather than experiences to be lived? "She set me up on a date, Bill," he said, "with someone she thought I might like, yes." Mia's eyes widened. "A date? Like a romantic date?" "Yeah." "Did you go?" "I did." "And?" Mia had abandoned her poster entirely now, giving him her full attention in a way that made Adrian acutely aware of how significant this conversation was. How long had it been since they'd talked about anything real? Anything that wasn't logistics or schedules or homework? "And it was complicated," Adrian said carefully. "Complicated how? The person I met, her name's Victoria. She's very different from what I expected. Different from what I'm used to. Different good or different bad? I don't know yet." Mia considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd been forced to grow up understanding that adults don't always have answers. "Do you want to see her again?" "Dao. Basayam." Did he? Adrian had been asking himself that question for 3 days and kept arriving at the same unsatisfying conclusion. Wanting something and allowing himself to pursue it were entirely separate issues. "Part of me does," he admitted. "What about the other part?" "The other part thinks it's safer to just keep things the way they are." "Safe is boring, though," Mia said, with the casual certainty of someone who'd never had her entire world upended by another person's choices. "That's what you always tell me when I don't want to try new things." Adrian stared at his daughter. "When did I say that?" "Like all the time. When I didn't want to try soccer because I thought I'd be bad at it. When I was scared to go to Emma's birthday party because I didn't know anyone. When I didn't want to do my science presentation because everyone might think it was stupid." Mia ticked off examples on her fingers. "You always say that being scared is normal, but staying scared means missing out on stuff." He had said that multiple times to his daughter, whose 8-year-old anxieties he took seriously and addressed with patience and encouragement while apparently applying exactly zero of that same logic to his own life. "You're right," Adrian said quietly. "So, are you going to call her?" "Maybe." "Dad?" Mia gave him a look that was far too knowing for her age. "That means no. It means I'm thinking about it." "For how long? Because thinking about stuff forever is the same as being too scared to do it. You told me that too." When had he become the kind of father whose own advice came back to haunt him through his perceptive, too smart daughter? "Okay," Adrian said. "You're right. I'll call her." "When?" "Soon." "Tonight?" "Mia, you're doing the thing where you agree, so I'll stop asking, but then you won't actually do it." She returned to her poster, but kept talking. "It's okay if you're scared, Dad. You don't have to pretend you're not." Adrian felt something crack in his chest, that same sensation he'd experienced in the cafe when Victoria had seen through his defenses with uncomfortable clarity. Except this time, it was his 8-year-old daughter doing the seeing, and somehow that was worse. "I am scared," he said. "Of what?" "Of everything. Of being hurt again. Of disrupting the fragile stability they'd built. Of wanting something beyond the narrow confines of his controlled existence and discovering it was just another mistake waiting to happen." "Of things changing," he said instead. Mia set down her glue stick and looked at him with an expression that was heartbreaking in its maturity. "Things change anyway, though, like when we had to move apartments because the old building got sold, or when Mrs. Patterson replaced Mr. Chen as my teacher, or when you started working from home more. We didn't want those things to change, but they did anyway." "That's true. So maybe sometimes you get to pick the change instead of just having it happen to you." She shrugged, returning to her reef. "That seems better." Adrian sat with that for a long moment, watching his daughter create her underwater world with careful, deliberate precision. When had she become this wise? Or had she always been this way, and he'd been too busy managing everything to notice? "You're pretty smart. You know that?" he said. "I know. You tell me all the time." Mia grinned at him, quick and bright. "So are you going to call her tonight?" "I don't know. Maybe." "That still means no." "It means I'm genuinely unsure." "Which is different." "If you say so." Mia returned her attention to the poster, apparently satisfied that she'd made her point. "Can I have hot chocolate before bed? It's a school night." "With extra marshmallows?" "Still a school night." "But I gave you good advice about your love life. Doesn't that earn marshmallows?" Despite everything, Adrian laughed. "Fine. But just this once." "You say that every time," Mia said, smiling. She wasn't wrong about that either. Later, after Mia had gone to bed with her hot chocolate-induced sugar rush finally wearing off, Adrian found himself alone in the living room with his laptop open to a work report he wasn't actually reading. His wallet sat on the coffee table where he'd emptied his pockets. Victoria's business card peeked out from behind his license, visible just enough to be impossible to ignore. "For when you're ready to stop running." Was he ready? Adrian honestly didn't know, but Mia's words kept circling back. Maybe sometimes you get to pick the change instead of just having it happen to you. He picked up his phone before he could talk himself out of it. The text he composed and deleted 4 times before finally sending was painfully simple. "This is Adrian. From Tuesday. Is this offer still open?" The response came faster than expected. "Depends. Are you texting me at 9:47 p.m. because you've spent the last 3 days overthinking, or because something else happened?" Adrian found himself almost smiling at her directness. "Definitely the overthinking," he typed back. "Good. That means you actually thought about it instead of just panicking." A pause. Then, "What changed your mind?" "My daughter told me I give better advice than I follow." "Smart kid. She's right. I know." Another pause. Adrian watched the 3 dots appear and disappear twice before Victoria's next message came through. "I'm at my office finishing up some work. Want to meet for a late coffee? Or is that too spontaneous for your carefully planned evening?" It was absolutely too spontaneous. Adrian had a routine. Review tomorrow's schedule, prep Mia's lunch, set out clothes, lights out by 10:30. Deviating from that meant tomorrow morning would be slightly more chaotic, which could cascade into small delays, which could... He stopped himself. That was the spiral Victoria had identified, the one where he turned every minor variation into a catastrophe. "Where?" he texted. "There's a 24-hour diner on 5th and Marshall. The Bluebird. Know it? I can find it. See you in 20? Adrian looked around his living room, the organized bookshelves, the precisely arranged furniture, the life he'd constructed to be predictable and safe and utterly resistant to surprise. Then he grabbed his jacket. See you in 20. The Bluebird Diner looked exactly like the kind of place that had existed in the same location since the 1950s and saw no reason to update. Red vinyl booths, a long counter with swivel stools, a jukebox in the corner that probably still worked. The kind of establishment that served breakfast all day and didn't judge you for ordering pancakes at midnight. Victoria was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a laptop open and papers spread across the table. She'd pulled her hair up in a messy knot, reading glasses perched on her nose, looking nothing like the polished CEO from her business card, and everything like someone who'd been working too long and probably forgot to eat dinner. She glanced up as Adrian approached, a smile replacing her focused expression. "You actually came," she said. "You sound surprised." A little. I gave you an out. Most people take it." Victoria started gathering her papers into a semblance of order. "Want to sit, or are you going to hover awkwardly?" Adrian slid into the booth across from her. A server appeared almost immediately, an older woman with tired eyes and a practiced smile. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please," Adrian said. "Same," Victoria added. "And do you still have that cherry pie?" "Always." "2 slices?" "Us." The server looked at Adrian, who nodded despite not having agreed to pie. She disappeared, returning moments later with coffee and dessert. "I didn't say I wanted pie," Adrian pointed out. "No, but it's almost 10 p.m. and you have the look of someone who skipped dinner to have an existential crisis. The pie is non-negotiable." Victoria took a bite of her own slice. "How's Mia?" "She's good. Asleep. I have a neighbor who keeps an ear out when I need to run out for short periods." "Okay." "That's nice of them." "Mrs. Chen, she's been doing it since Mia was 3. I pay her, obviously, but she treats Mia like an extra grandkid." Adrian tried the pie. It was better than it had any right to be. "She asked me about you." "Mrs. Chen?" "Mia." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "You told your daughter about me?" "She asked if I was mad at my sister for setting up the date. It came out." "And what did you tell her?" "That you were complicated." Chitsi. Wow. Every woman's dream description. But Victoria was smiling. What did she say? She wanted to know if complicated was good or bad. I said I didn't know yet. Honest, I appreciate that. Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "For the record, you're complicated too, so we're even." "How am I complicated?" "You showed up tonight, which suggests you want this, whatever this is. But you're sitting there like you're waiting for me to confirm that meeting me was a terrible mistake, so you can go home and tell yourself you tried." Victoria tilted her head, studying him. "Am I wrong?" "No," Adrian admitted. "That's pretty accurate. So why come at all?" Because my daughter pointed out that I give her advice about facing fears and trying new things that I completely ignore in my own life. And she was right. She sounds like someone I'd like to meet." The comment was casual, but it sent a small spike of panic through Adrian's system. Meeting Mia meant this was real, meant expectations and potential complications. And, "Relax," Victoria said, clearly reading his expression. "I'm not proposing we introduce me to your kid tomorrow. I'm just saying she sounds smart and self-aware and probably much more emotionally intelligent than either of us." "She is." "Good. The world needs more of that." Victoria closed her laptop, giving Adrian her full attention. "Okay, here's what I'm thinking. We spent our first meeting with me covered in pond mud and you having a minor crisis about control and safety. Not exactly typical first date territory. What's typical? Betumarsrim. I don't know. Small talk about jobs and hobbies, polite questions about family, the kind of conversation where everyone performs the acceptable version of themselves and nobody says anything real? That sounds terrible." "It is terrible, which is why I'm proposing we skip it entirely." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Not the polite answer, not the safe answer, the real one." "Okay. Why did you really text me tonight?" Adrian could have deflected, could have repeated the line about Mia and advice. Instead, he found himself saying, Because for 3 days, I've been going through my routine: work, parenting, maintaining the house, managing schedules, and for the first time in years, it felt insufficient. Like I was going through motions instead of living a life. And that scared me more than the idea of texting you. Victoria was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable. That's a good answer, she said finally. Your turn, Adrian said. My turn for what? To answer honestly. Why did you give me your number? You could have just walked away Tuesday, written it off as a failed blind date, and moved on. I could have, Victoria agreed, but I didn't want to. Why not? Because most people I meet want something from me. Investment, connections, access to resources. Or they're intimidated by the CEO thing and treat me like I'm going to evaluate their business plan at any moment. You didn't do either of those things. You were just honest about being terrified of getting close to anyone, which was refreshing in its own weird way. That's what made me interesting? Being emotionally unavailable? Was Imran. No. What made you interesting was that you were emotionally unavailable and willing to admit it. Most people pretend they're fine, that they have their act together. You sat there and said, I'm a disaster who's turned myself into a robot to avoid being hurt. That takes guts. Or therapy, Adrian said. Same thing sometimes. Victoria ate more pie. Can I ask you something else? Sure. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Not because it was responsible or necessary or good for Mia. Just because it sounded appealing in the moment. Adrian thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe before Rebecca left? I used to go to this photography spot by the river on Sunday mornings. I'd bring coffee and just take pictures of whatever caught my attention. Birds, people, light on water. Nothing professional, just for me. Why'd you stop? Mia was little. Sundays became grocery shopping and meal prep and getting ready for the week ahead. It seemed frivolous to spend time on something that didn't contribute to keeping everything running. And you never went back to it? No. Do you miss it? The question hit harder than Adrian expected. Did he miss it? He'd spent so long not thinking about the things he'd given up that he'd almost convinced himself they didn't matter. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. So go back. It's not that simple. Why not? Wake up early Sunday, grab your camera, go to the river. Mia can come with you or stay with Mrs. Chen for an hour. That's it. That's the whole plan. What if something comes up? Then you deal with it, but you're making up problems that don't exist yet. Victoria pointed her fork at him for emphasis. This is what I'm talking about. You've convinced yourself that having any time or energy for yourself means neglecting Mia. But what you're actually doing is teaching her that adults don't get to have interests or joy or spontaneity. Is that what you want her to learn? No. Then stop modeling it. Adrian felt defensive and couldn't entirely say why. You don't have kids. You don't know what it's like to be solely responsible for another person's well-being. You're right, I don't. Victoria didn't sound offended, just matter of fact. But I do know what it's like to use responsibility as a shield against living. I built a company from nothing, employ 300 people, make decisions that impact lives and livelihoods every single day. And for years I told myself I couldn't take time off, couldn't pursue relationships, couldn't do anything that might distract from that responsibility. You know what happened? What? I became someone I didn't recognize, someone who could run a company but couldn't remember the last time they'd laughed at something genuinely funny, someone who had achieved every professional goal they'd set and felt completely empty inside. Victoria's voice was quiet but steady. My wake-up call was landing in the ER. What's yours going to be? I don't know, say. Then figure it out before Mia gets old enough to realize her father sacrificed his entire identity for her and resents him for it. The words stung because they contained truth Adrian didn't want to acknowledge. He wanted to argue, to defend his choices, to explain that Victoria didn't understand the complexity of his situation. Instead, he said, "You're very direct." I am. It's a character flaw according to most people. Victoria finished her pie. Look, I'm not trying to tell you how to parent or live your life. What? But I'm trying to tell you that the walls you've built to protect yourself are also keeping you trapped. And at some point, you're going to have to decide which is worse. The risk of being hurt or the certainty of being alone. I'm not alone. I have Mia. Mia is 8. Eventually, she's going to grow up and have her own life. And if you've spent her entire childhood making her the center of your universe, what happens when she leaves? Adrian didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence for a moment, the diner's ambient noise filling the space between them. A cook called out an order. The jukebox played something soft and old. Other patrons laughed at a nearby table. I don't know how to do this, Adrian said finally. Do what? Be open. Take risks. Want things for myself without feeling guilty about it. Nobody does at first. It's a skill you develop. Victoria signaled for more coffee. Start small. Do one thing this week that's just for you. Not for Mia, not for work, just because you want to. Like what? I don't know. What sounds appealing? Adrian thought about it. What did sound appealing? The question itself felt foreign, like trying to remember a language he'd once spoken fluently, but had forgotten through lack of use. There's a photography exhibit at the Art Center downtown, he said slowly. Contemporary landscape work. I saw a poster for it last week. Do you want to go? Do. I haven't been to an exhibit in years. That's not what I asked. Do you want to go? Yes. Then go. Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, whenever. Just go. What if nothing? You're creating obstacles that don't exist. Victoria smiled at him, not unkindly. Adrian, I'm going to tell you something my therapist told me that I hated hearing but needed to understand. Are you ready? I guess. The world will not fall apart if you're not constantly holding it together. Mia will be fine if you take 2 hours for yourself. Your schedule will survive a deviation. You are not the only thing standing between order and chaos. She paused. And the sooner you believe that, the sooner you can actually start living instead of just surviving. Adrian wanted to argue with that too, but he was tired of arguing, tired of defending walls he'd built that were starting to feel less like protection and more like prison bars. Okay, he said. Okay, what? Okay, I'll go to the exhibit this weekend. Good, I want a full report. Victoria checked her phone. It's getting late. You should probably head back before Mrs. Chen starts worrying. What about you? I'm going back to the office for another hour or two. Quarterly reports don't write themselves. It's almost 11. And? That's not healthy. Victoria laughed, genuine and surprised. Listen to you giving me advice about work-life balance. I'm serious. You just spent 20 minutes telling me I need to take time for myself. When's the last time you did? Victoria stopped. That's a fair point. So maybe you should go home too. I have a presentation Monday that will still be there tomorrow, see? I can do this too. Making up obstacles that don't exist. Adrian surprised himself by smiling. Go home, Victoria. The quarterly reports will survive another day. She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. You know what? You're right. I'm going home. Good. They stood, gathering their things. Victoria left cash on the table. Too much, Adrian noticed, but didn't comment. They walked out together into the cool night air. This was good, Victoria said. Better than I expected when you texted. Yeah? Yeah, you're less guarded than Tuesday. Still guarded, but less. It's progress. Is that what this is? Progress? I think so. Unless you're planning to disappear for another 3 days and have another crisis about whether talking to me was a mistake. I might. At least you're honest about it. Victoria unlocked her car, then turned back to him. Can I ask you one more question before we go? Sure. Are you glad you came tonight? Adrian considered lying, or hedging, or giving some non-committal response that would preserve his ability to retreat if necessary. Instead, he said, Yes, I am. Good. Me too. Victoria's smile was warm, real. Text me about the exhibit. I want to know if you actually go or if you chicken out. I'll go. We'll see. She drove away, leaving Adrian standing in the diner's parking lot, feeling like something fundamental had shifted in a way he couldn't quite articulate. He went home, checked on Mia, who was sleeping soundly with her stuffed sea turtle clutched to her chest, and then did something he hadn't done in months. He pulled out his old camera from the back of his closet. It still worked. The battery was dead, but the body was intact, the lens clean. Adrian held it for a long time, remembering Sunday mornings by the river, the meditative quality of watching light change, the satisfaction of capturing a moment exactly right. Then he plugged it into charge and marked Saturday afternoon on his calendar. Photography exhibit, 2 hours, non-negotiable. He fell asleep that night thinking about composition and light instead of schedules and risks. And for the first time in recent memory, it felt like choosing something instead of just enduring it. Saturday arrived with the kind of bright, clear morning that made Adrian's carefully maintained schedule feel almost oppressive. He'd woken at his usual time, gone through his usual routine, made Mia's usual Saturday pancakes, and the entire time his camera sat on the kitchen counter like a challenge he wasn't sure he was ready to accept. "You're being weird," Mia observed around a mouthful of blueberries. "I'm not being weird. You keep looking at your camera like it's going to bite you." She swallowed, then added, "Are you going to take pictures today?" "Maybe." "Dad, we talked about this," maybe means no. Adrian poured himself more coffee, buying time. "I'm going to that photography exhibit this afternoon. I mentioned it, remember? The one you've been talking about all week but keep finding reasons not to go to?" "I haven't been finding reasons." Mia gave him a look that suggested she knew exactly what he'd been doing. "You reorganized the garage yesterday, on a Friday night, when there was nothing wrong with it. It needed organizing." "It was already organized. You were just nervous." She finished her pancakes and carried her plate to the sink with the careful precision of a child who'd been taught to clean up after herself from a young age. "Is it because of Victoria?" Adrian nearly dropped his coffee mug. "What?" "The exhibit. You're going because she told you to, right? That's why you're nervous." "She didn't tell me to go. She suggested it." "Same thing." Mia rinsed her plate, set it in the dishwasher. "Do you like her?" "I don't know her well enough to—" "Dad." "What?" "You're doing the grown-up thing where you make everything complicated when it's actually really simple." Mia turned to face him, hands on her hips in a pose she'd definitely learned from Laura. "Do you like her or not?" Adrian looked at his 8-year-old daughter and wondered when she'd become the emotionally honest one in this relationship. "Yeah," he said. "I think I do." "Then go to the exhibit. Take some pictures. Stop being scared of having fun." Mia grabbed her backpack. "Emma's mom is picking me up for the aquarium trip at 10, remember? We'll be back around 4. "I remember." "Good. So you have like 6 hours to do whatever you want. Don't waste them reorganizing stuff that doesn't need it." She was out the door before Adrian could formulate a response, leaving him alone with his coffee and his camera and the uncomfortable realization that his daughter had just given him permission to have a life. He texted Victoria at 9:30, "Going to the exhibit at noon." "Thought you should know I'm not chickening out." Her response came 5 minutes later. "Proud of you. Want company or going solo?" Or, Adrian stared at the message. Company meant this became something more intentional, more like a date and less like a personal challenge he was undertaking. Solo meant safety, but also exactly the kind of isolation Victoria had called him out on. "Company might be good," he typed, then deleted it. "Solo feels safer," he wrote, then deleted that too. Finally, "What are you doing at noon?" "Nothing that can't be rescheduled." "Meet you there?" "Yeah, okay." "Relax. I can practically hear you panicking through the phone. It's just art and conversation. You've survived worse." Adrian wasn't entirely sure that was true, but he appreciated the sentiment. The Arts Center occupied a converted warehouse in the downtown district, all exposed brick and industrial lighting that had probably cost more to achieve than the original building had. Adrian arrived 10 minutes early, old habits, and found Victoria already there, sitting on a bench outside with her face tilted toward the sun. She wore jeans and a dark green sweater, her hair down, sunglasses perched on top of her head. She looked relaxed in a way that Adrian envied, like she belonged in her own skin without having to constantly monitor or adjust. "You're early," she said when she spotted him. "So are you." "I'm always early. Habit from too many years of sprint meetings and investor pitches." Victoria stood, slinging her bag over one shoulder. "Ready?" "I think so. That's the least convincing yes I've ever heard." "It's the best I can do right now. Fair enough. Victoria gestured toward the entrance. After you. The exhibit was called Thresholds. Photographs exploring transitions, boundaries, moments caught between one state and another. Dawn and dusk, doorways and windows, places where land met water. Adrian found himself drawn into the images immediately, the careful attention to light and composition speaking to something he'd forgotten he understood. They moved through this gallery in comfortable silence at first, each absorbed in their own observations. Adrian paused in front of a large print showing an open door in an abandoned building, morning light cutting through dust motes to illuminate the threshold between dark interior and bright exterior. "What do you see?" Victoria asked quietly, coming to stand beside him. "Fear," Adrian said, surprising himself with the honesty. "Or maybe possibility. I can't tell which. Maybe both. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes." Adrian glanced at her. "You think fear and possibility are the same?" I think the things that scare us most are usually the things that could change us most. That doorway, whoever took this photo is asking you to consider what's on the other side. But to find out, you have to step through, and that's terrifying and exciting in equal measure. Set. They moved on to the next image, this one a study of coastal erosion, waves wearing away at stone over time. Persistence, Victoria said, studying it. Or destruction. Depends on your perspective. You see a lot in these, don't you? That's the whole point of art, isn't it? To make you feel something or think something you wouldn't have otherwise. I guess I stopped thinking about it that way. Photography became more technical for me. Aperture and composition and proper exposure. Those matter, Victoria said, but they're just tools. What matters is what you're trying to say. What if you don't have anything to say? Everyone has something to say. Most people are just afraid to say it. They continued through the gallery, stopping and starting, sometimes talking about what they saw, and sometimes just being quiet together. Adrian found himself relaxing incrementally, the familiar visual language of the photographs pulling him back into a headspace he hadn't occupied in years. Near the end of the exhibit, they came to a triptych showing the same landscape at 3 different times: dawn, noon, dusk. The composition was identical, but the light transformed everything, turning the same scene into 3 distinct emotional experiences. "This one," Adrian said, "this is what I used to try to capture, how the same place could feel completely different depending on when you looked at it." "Why'd you stop?" "I told you. Time, priorities, life got in the way." "Life didn't get in the way, Adrian. You decided other things were more important. There's a difference." He wanted to argue but couldn't. She was right. "Do you still have any of your photos?" Victoria asked. "Some. On an old hard drive somewhere. Can I see them sometime?" "They're not very good." "I didn't ask if they were good. I asked if I could see them." Adrian looked at her, this woman who'd crashed into his life covered in pond mud, and proceeded to systematically dismantle every excuse he'd constructed for keeping the world at arm's length. "Yeah," he said. "You can see them." They finished the exhibit and emerged back into afternoon sunlight. Adrian felt different somehow, like something that had been tightly wound inside him had loosened slightly. "Thank you," he said, "for coming." "Thank you for inviting me, or agreeing to company, whichever." Victoria checked her phone. "It's only 2. Want to grab lunch, or is that pushing my luck?" Adrian thought about his empty house, the hours stretching until Mia got home, the carefully planned afternoon he'd mentally scheduled of productive tasks that didn't actually need doing. "Lunch sounds good," he said. They found a small cafe a few blocks away, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. They ordered sandwiches and claimed a table by the window. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said once they'd settled. "You're going to anyway." "True, but I'm trying to be polite about it." She unwrapped her sandwich. "When you were married, before everything fell apart, were you happy?" The question caught Adrian off guard. Most people asked about the divorce itself, the mechanics of the ending. Victoria was asking about before. "I thought I was," he said carefully. "But looking back, I don't know if I was happy or just comfortable. There's a difference." What made you comfortable? Rebecca was exciting, spontaneous, everything I wasn't. Being with her felt like having access to this whole other way of experiencing the world. Adrian picked at his food. I think I mistook that for love, the excitement of being with someone who was my opposite. But it wasn't sustainable. No. Turns out when you build a relationship on someone else providing all the spontaneity and excitement, and then you have a kid and real responsibilities, that person might not want to stick around for the boring parts. That's not on you, though. Her leaving. Isn't it? I knew what she was like when I married her. I just thought she'd change when we had Mia, that becoming a mother would make her want to settle down. People don't change because we want them to. They change because they want to change. Victoria took a bite of her sandwich, chewed thoughtfully. My ex, the therapist I mentioned, she used to say that I was trying to solve my grief by working myself to death. That I thought if I could just build something successful enough, it would fill the hole my father's death left. And she was right, which made it incredibly annoying. What happened with her, if you don't mind me asking? She wanted marriage, kids, a house in the suburbs, the whole traditional package. And I was 27, running a startup, working 90-hour weeks, and the idea of any of that made me want to run screaming in the opposite direction. Victoria's smile was rueful. So I ended it badly, because I was too much of a coward to admit I was terrified of commitment. Hurt her pretty deeply in the process. Do you regret it? Ending it? No. We weren't right for each other, and dragging it out would have been worse. But I regret how I did it. I regret not being honest about what scared me until she'd already invested 3 years in us. She met his eyes. I learned something, though. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is be honest about your limitations before someone gets hurt. Is that what you're doing with me? Being honest about your limitations? I'm trying to. I'm also trying to understand yours. Victoria set down her sandwich. Here's what I know so far. You're smart. You're a good father. You're deeply afraid of being hurt again. And you've convinced yourself that the solution is total control over every variable in your life. Am I missing anything? That about covers it. So, here's what I want to know. If you could wave a magic wand and make the fear disappear, what would you want? Adrian didn't have to think about it. I'd want to feel like my life belonged to me again. Not like I'm just the administrator of Mia's childhood, and my own existence is whatever's left over. That's honest. You asked for honest. I did. Victoria leaned back in her chair. You know what I want? I want to build something with someone that isn't based on what we can do for each other professionally, or how we look together, or any of that superficial nonsense. I want to be with someone who sees all my flaws and ambition and workaholism and decides I'm worth the effort anyway. Bam cham mus. That sounds reasonable, but it is reasonable, but it also requires me to let someone close enough to see the flaws in the first place, which I'm historically terrible at, she smiled. So I guess we're both disasters in our own special ways. That's comforting. Isn't it? Victoria finished her sandwich. Can I tell you something that might scare you? Go ahead. I like you, Adrian. Not the version of you that's got everything together and never makes mistakes. The actual you, who's terrified and trying anyway. And I'd like to keep seeing you, if you're open to that. But I need you to know up front that I'm not going to be patient with you using fear as an excuse forever. Adrian felt his chest tighten. What does that mean? It means I understand you're scared. I understand you've been hurt. But at some point, you're going to have to decide whether you trust me enough to let me in, or whether you're going to keep one foot out the door in case you need to run. And I'm not interested in dating someone who's constantly planning their exit strategy. That's fair. Is it something you can do? Actually let someone in? I don't know, Adrian said honestly. I'd like to think so, but I can't promise I won't mess it up. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for effort. Real effort, not just going through motions. Victoria's expression was serious, but not unkind. If you can do that, I'm all in. If you can't, tell me now so neither of us wastes time on something that's not going to work. Adrian sat with that, feeling the weight of the choice she was putting in front of him. The safe thing would be to walk away now, to thank her for her honesty and return to his carefully controlled life. But safety had started to feel less like protection and more like suffocation. I want to try, he said. Really try. But I need you to be patient when I mess up, because I will mess up. Worsham. I can do patient. What I can't do is pretend to be okay with half measures. Victoria reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her palm. Deal? Deal. They sat there for a moment, something unspoken settling between them that felt like commitment without being overwhelming. Adrian's phone buzzed. A text from Mia. Having the best time. Did you go to the exhibit? Did you take pictures? Is Victoria there? He showed Victoria the message. She laughed. Your daughter is not subtle. She gets it from my sister. Should I be worried about being interrogated by an 8-year-old? Probably. What? Mum? Adrian texted back. Exhibit was good. Taking pictures later. Victoria says hi. The response was immediate. Victoria is there. I knew it. Are you on a date? She knows, Adrian said. What did you tell her about me? The truth, that you're complicated and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm trying anyway. And she approved? She told me maybe means no, and I needed to stop being scared of having fun. Victoria's smile was genuine, warm. I really do want to meet her sometime. Yeah? Yeah, if you're comfortable with that. Adrian thought about Mia's questions, her curiosity, the way she'd given him permission to pursue something for himself. I think she'd like that, but maybe let's not rush it. Agreed. No rushing. Victoria stood, gathering her things. I should get going. I have actual quarterly reports that actually need finishing, and I've been procrastinating long enough. Do you want help? The offer surprised both of them. Help with quarterly reports? Victoria asked. I'm good with numbers and analysis. It's kind of what I do. You want to spend your Saturday afternoon helping me with paperwork. I want to spend time with you. The paperwork is just an excuse. Victoria's expression shifted to something softer. That might be the nicest thing anyone's offered me in months, but I'm going to say no. Why? Because you need to go take pictures. Actually take them, not just carry your camera around thinking about it. She pulled on her jacket. Go to that river spot you mentioned. Spend an hour or two remembering why you loved it. Then text me and tell me how it went. You're very bossy. I prefer decisively encouraging. Makes me sound less controlling. Adrian walked her to her car, neither of them in any particular hurry. When they reached it, Victoria turned to face him. Today was good, she said. It was. Same time next week? Or is that too scheduled for someone who's supposed to be learning spontaneity? Next week works. What should we do? I don't know. We'll figure it out. Victoria unlocked her car, paused. Adrian? Yeah? Thank you for trying. I know it's not easy for you. Thank you for pushing. I know I need it even when I don't want it. She drove away, and Adrian stood in the parking lot feeling like he'd just navigated something significant without entirely understanding what it was. Then he drove to the river. The spot looked exactly as he remembered it, a small clearing along the walking path where the water bent and caught light in interesting ways. He'd spent dozens of Sunday mornings here years ago, long before Mia, when his biggest concern had been whether he'd captured the exact quality of dawn light on moving water. Adrian pulled out his camera, feeling the familiar weight of it in his hands. The first few shots were terrible. His framing was off, his instincts rusty from disuse. But gradually, as he moved along this bank and paid attention to what he was seeing rather than overthinking it, something shifted. He found himself noticing details he'd forgotten to look for, the way shadows fell across rocks, birds creating ripples as they landed, the subtle color variations in the water itself. An hour passed without him realizing it. Then another. He took maybe 50 photos, most of which would probably be mediocre at best. But a few, a handful, captured something real, something that felt like the visual equivalent of the conversation he'd had with Victoria about thresholds and possibility and fear. His phone buzzed. A text from Mia. We're on our way home. Mrs. Chen says you're not there. Where are you? Adrian looked at the time. 4:15. He'd lost track completely, too absorbed in what he was doing to monitor his schedule. At the river. taking pictures. Be home in 20, he texted back. You went to the river? Dad! A string of celebration emojis followed. Adrian found himself smiling at his phone like an idiot. He took one more shot, the path leading away from the water, afternoon light filtering through trees, and then packed up his camera. On the drive home, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, satisfaction that had nothing to do with checking items off a list or fulfilling responsibilities. Just the quiet pleasure of having done something purely because he wanted to. Mia was already home when he arrived, bursting with stories about the aquarium. She talked through dinner preparation, through dinner itself, barely pausing for breath as she described the touch pools and the shark tunnel and the sea otter who'd been playing with a rock. Did you have fun at the exhibit? She asked finally, when she'd exhausted her own stories. I did. And you took pictures at the river? Yeah, a lot of them. Can I see? Adrian pulled up the images on his camera's display screen, flipping through them. Most were forgettable, but a few made him pause. The one of the path particularly, something about the composition and light felt right. These are good, Dad, Mia said, studying them seriously. Really good. You think so? Yeah. They look like you actually cared about taking them, not just like you were doing it because you were supposed to. Out of the mouths of children. Adrian ruffled her hair, earning a protest. What about Victoria? Mia asked. Did you see her? Yeah, we went to the exhibit together and had lunch. So it was a date. I guess it was. Good. Mia returned to her dinner, apparently satisfied. I like her. You've never met her. I know. But she makes you act more like a person and less like a robot, so I like her. Adrian almost choked on his water. I don't act like a robot. What? Dad, you color code the spice rack. That's called organization. It's called robot behavior. But Mia was grinning. It's okay. I still love you even when you're being weird. Later that night, after Mia had gone to bed, Adrian sat down with his laptop and the hard drive containing his old photographs. He hadn't looked at them in years, had almost forgotten they existed, but Victoria had asked to see them, and something about her request felt important. He found the folder, opened it, and scrolled through images he barely remembered taking. They weren't technically perfect. His skills had been developing, his eyes still learning, but there was something in them, some quality of attention and care that he'd lost somewhere along the way. He selected a few favorites and texted them to Victoria with the message, "Old work. Like I said, not very good." "But you asked." Her response came quickly. "These are beautiful. Why did you ever stop?" "Life happened," he typed back. "That's not a good enough reason." "I know, so don't let it be a reason anymore. Keep taking pictures. Keep going to exhibits. Keep doing things that remind you you're more than just Mia's dad." Adrian looked at the photos on his screen, then at the new ones from today, still on his camera. They represented something he'd thought was gone forever, a part of himself that existed independent of his roles and responsibilities. "Okay," he sent. "I will. Good. Now go to sleep. It's almost midnight, and you're probably already calculating how tomorrow's schedule will be affected by staying up late." She wasn't wrong. "Good night, Victoria." "Good night. Adrian, I'm glad you had a good day." He was glad too, and that in itself felt like progress. The next morning, Sunday, Adrian woke to find Mia already up and making cereal with the determined independence of a child who'd decided not to wake her father. He found her at the kitchen table, working on math homework she'd claimed to have finished Friday. "Morning, Bug," he said. "Morning. I'm being quiet so you could sleep in." "Did it work?" "It's 7:30. That's sleeping in for me." "That's sad." Mia returned to her homework. "Are we doing anything today?" Usually Sunday meant meal prep for the week, grocery shopping, laundry, all the maintenance tasks that kept their household running smoothly. Adrian could feel the pull of routine, the comfortable predictability of scheduled productivity. Instead, he heard himself say, "Want to come to the river with me? I'm going to take more pictures." Mia's head snapped up, her expression pure delight. "Really? Really? We can pack lunch, make it an afternoon thing? Well, Can I bring my sketchbook? I've been trying to draw sea turtles, but they keep looking weird." "Sure, we'll work on it together." They spent the afternoon by the water, Adrian photographing while Mia sketched, occasionally interrupting each other to share something interesting they'd noticed. It wasn't productive in any measurable way. It didn't check anything off any list. But when they drove home as the sun was setting, both of them tired and happy, Adrian realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd spent time with his daughter that wasn't structured around a specific purpose or goal. "This was fun," Mia said as they pulled into their parking spot. "Can we do it again?" "Yeah," Adrian said. "We can do it again." That night, after Mia was in bed, he texted Victoria a photo of Mia's sea turtle sketch alongside one of his river shots. "Good day," he wrote simply. "The best kind," she replied. "Same time next Saturday? There's a sculpture garden I've been meaning to visit." "It's a date," Adrian typed, and this time the word didn't feel quite so terrifying. The sculpture garden turned into coffee, turned into a standing Saturday arrangement that neither of them officially acknowledged, but both showed up for without fail. 3 weeks became 6, then 8, and somewhere in that progression, Adrian stopped mentally cataloging all the ways this could go wrong and started noticing how much easier it was to breathe when Victoria was around. But he still hadn't introduced her to Mia. "You're stalling," Laura said over the phone one Tuesday evening while Adrian pretended to organize his already organized pantry. "It's been 2 months. Either this is serious or it's not. It's complicated. Everything's complicated with you. That's your default setting." Laura's voice softened slightly. "What are you actually afraid of?" Adrian moved a can of beans from one shelf to another, then moved it back. "What if Mia gets attached and then it doesn't work out? What if it does work out and you sabotage it because you're too scared to find out? That's not helpful. It's not supposed to be helpful. It's supposed to be honest." Laura paused. "Has Victoria asked to meet her?" "A few times. I keep making excuses." "And she's okay with that?" "She says she understands, that I should move at my own pace. But I can tell she's hurt. She tries to hide it, but I can tell." "So you're hurting someone who cares about you because you're afraid of potentially hurting your daughter who currently doesn't even know this person exists. Does that make sense to you?" Put that way, it didn't. Adrian closed the pantry door and leaned against the counter. "No." "Then fix it. Introduce them. See what happens. The world will not end, Adrian, I promise." After he hung up, Adrian found Mia in the living room, surrounded by library books about marine ecosystems. She'd developed an obsession with kelp forests and couldn't stop talking about sea otters. "Can I ask you something?" he said, sitting down on the couch. "Sure." Mia didn't look up from her book, which featured a detailed illustration of underwater food chains. "How would you feel about meeting Victoria, like actually meeting her, not just hearing about her? Now Mia looked up, eyes wide. "Really? Really? If you want to. Are you kidding? I've been waiting for you to ask for like forever." Mia set down her book. "When?" "I don't know. Soon. Maybe this weekend?" "This weekend is 3 days away. That's not soon. That's an eternity." Adrian almost smiled. "What if we invited her to dinner? Here, Saturday night. Would that be okay?" "Okay? Dad, that would be amazing." Then her expression turned serious. "But you have to promise me something, Sus." "What?" "Promise you won't be weird." "I'm not weird." "You're super weird, especially when you're nervous. You do this thing where you clean stuff that doesn't need cleaning and ask too many questions about nothing important." "I do not." Mia gave him a look that suggested she had receipts to prove otherwise. "Just be normal, okay? Be the version of you that you are when you're taking pictures and not thinking so hard." "I can try." "Good." Mia returned to her book, then added without looking up, "I really hope I like her, for your sake." "What if you don't?" "Then we'll figure it out, but I probably will." You have good taste in people, even if you are terrible at admitting you like them. Adrian texted Victoria that night. "Dinner at my place Saturday? Want you to meet Mia, if you're ready for that." Her response came almost immediately. "I've been ready. You're the one who's been making us wait." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Just tell me what time and what I can bring. 6:30? And just yourself. See you then." Adrian spent the next 3 days simultaneously preparing for Saturday and trying not to overthink it, which resulted in him doing exactly what Mia had predicted, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, reorganizing spaces that were already organized. and generally channeling his anxiety into compulsive productivity. By Saturday afternoon, the apartment was spotless to the point of absurdity. Adrian had changed his shirt 3 times, settled on the blue one Laura had told him to wear to the first date, then changed again because that felt too intentional. Mia watched this entire process with barely concealed amusement. "You're doing the thing," she observed from her position on the couch. "What thing?" "The nervous weird thing. I literally just told you not to do this." "I'm not nervous." "Dad, you've rearranged the silverware drawer twice." Adrian looked down at the drawer he'd been unconsciously reorganizing. The spoons were fine. Everything's fine. You just can't handle not having something to control." Mia stood up and closed the silverware drawer firmly. "She's gonna like us. We're likable. Stop panicking." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't usually listen." She hugged him quickly. "It's gonna be okay. I promise." Victoria arrived at exactly 6:30, which Adrian appreciated even though he recognized the irony of being soothed by punctuality. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled back, carrying a bottle of wine and looking significantly less nervous than Adrian felt. "Hi," she said when he opened the door. "Hi, come in." Victoria stepped into the apartment, taking in the space with genuine interest rather than polite assessment. "This is nice. I like it." "Salty. Jashi. It's small," Adrian said automatically. "It's cozy. There's a difference." Victoria set the wine on the counter, then turned as Mia appeared from the hallway. For a moment, nobody spoke. Adrian realized he should probably make introductions, say something to break the tension, but his brain had apparently decided this was the moment to completely shut down. Mia, bless her, had no such problem. "You're Victoria," she said. "I'm Mia. It's nice to finally meet you." She said it with the formal politeness of a child who'd been coached on meeting adults, and it made Victoria smile. "It's nice to finally meet you too. Your dad's told me a lot about you. He's told me about you too. Mostly that you make him act like a person instead of a robot, which I appreciate." Mia glanced at Adrian. "See? Not being weird. You should try it." Victoria laughed, genuine and surprised. "I like her already, Anne." "Thanks. I like me too." Mia gestured toward the kitchen. "Dad made pasta. It's one of like 4 things he knows how to cook that aren't just putting chicken in the oven." That's not true," Adrian protested, finally finding his voice. "I know at least 6 things. If you count different shapes of pasta as different meals, maybe." Victoria caught Adrian's eye, her expression warm with barely suppressed amusement. He felt some of his tension ease. This was going to be okay. Maybe. Dinner was easier than Adrian expected. Mia dominated the conversation, asking Victoria questions with the directness of someone who hadn't yet learned to be subtle about information gathering. Where did she grow up? Did she have siblings? What was it like running a company? Had she ever been to the Monterey Bay Aquarium because Mia really wanted to go, and maybe they could all go together sometime? Victoria answered everything with patience and honesty, never talking down to Mia, but also not pretending she was an adult. When Mia asked about her father's death, Adrian tensed, ready to redirect, but Victoria handled it simply. "He had cancer. It was really hard, and I was sad for a long time. I still miss him sometimes. My mom left when I was little," Mia offered. "My mom left when... I don't really remember her. Is that weird?" "No, I don't think it's weird at all. People leave our lives for different reasons, and however you feel about it is okay." Dad gets sad when people ask about her. Not because he misses her, but because he feels bad that I don't have a mom. Adrian froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. He'd had no idea Mia had noticed that, had processed his reactions with that kind of awareness. "That makes sense," Victoria said calmly. "Your dad loves you a lot. Of course he'd feel bad that you don't have something he thinks you should have." "But I have him," Mia said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "And Aunt Laura and Mrs. Chen, that's a lot of people." "It is," Victoria agreed. "You're pretty lucky." "I know." Mia took another bite of pasta. "Are you and my dad boyfriend-girlfriend, or is this still the awkward phase where you're figuring it out?" Adrian choked on his water. Victoria, to her credit, didn't miss a beat. What do you think? Is it awkward phase or boyfriend-girlfriend? Mia considered this seriously. I think you like each other, but Dad's being careful because he doesn't want anyone to get hurt. Which is nice, but also kind of exhausting because everyone can tell you like each other, so pretending you're still figuring it out is silly. She's very perceptive, Victoria said to Adrian. I'm realizing that, he managed. After dinner, Mia insisted on showing Victoria her room, which meant a detailed tour of her stuffed animal collection organized by marine species and the poster wall covered with ocean photographs she'd printed from the library computer. This one's my favorite, Mia said, pointing to a shot of a sea otter floating on its back. They hold hands when they sleep so they don't drift apart. Did you know that? I did, actually. It's pretty adorable. Right. Nature is so cool. Mia grabbed a sketchbook from her desk. Want to see my drawings? I'm not very good yet, but Dad says practice matters more than being perfect. She said it casually. But Adrian heard the echo of countless conversations where he'd encouraged her to try things without worrying about immediate success. Apparently, he was better at giving advice than following it in every aspect of his life. Victoria spent 20 minutes looking through Mia's sketches, offering genuine compliments and asking questions that showed she was actually paying attention. Adrian watched from the doorway, something warm and unfamiliar settling in his chest. Eventually, Mia started yawning, and Victoria took that as her cue to leave. Mia hugged her goodbye, quick and unselfconscious, and disappeared into her room to get ready for bed. Adrian walked Victoria to the door. Thank you, he said, for being so good with her. She's easy to be good with. She's smart and funny and way more emotionally intelligent than either of us. Victoria pulled on her jacket. I can see why you're so protective of her. I'm sorry I waited so long to introduce you. I understand why you did. She's the most important person in your life. You were protecting her. Victoria paused. But Adrian? Yeah? She doesn't need as much protecting as you think. She's tougher than you give her credit for. I know, or I'm starting to know. Good. Victoria moved toward the door, then turned back. Can I ask you something? Sure. What Mia said at dinner about us figuring out what this is. Do you think she's right? That we're past the awkward phase? Adrian could deflect, make a joke, keep things undefined for a little while longer. But looking at Victoria standing in his doorway, patient and honest and willing to wait while he worked through his own fears, he found he didn't want to. Yeah, he said, I think she's right. So what does that make us? I don't know. What do you want it to make us? I want this to be real, not tentative or temporary, or something we're still testing out, real. Adrian felt the familiar spike of fear that came with commitment, with admitting he wanted something enough to risk losing it. But underneath the fear was something stronger, the recognition that he'd already made this choice weeks ago and had just been too scared to acknowledge it. Me too, he said. Victoria's smile was soft, relieved. Good. That's good. She kissed him then, quick and sweet, and Adrian was surprised by how natural it felt. Good night, Adrian. Good night. After she left, Adrian found Mia sitting on her bed, still awake despite her earlier yawning. So? She asked. What did you think? I think you're supposed to be asleep. I will be. In a minute. But first tell me what you thought. Adrian sat down on the edge of her bed. I think she's pretty great. What did you think? I think she's perfect for you. She's smart and nice, and she didn't act weird when I asked about her dad dying. Plus, she actually looked at my drawings instead of just pretending to care. Mia pulled her blanket up to her chin. Are you going to keep seeing her? Yeah, I am. Good. You're happier when you talk about her. I like when you're happy. Adrian felt the crack in his chest widen slightly, that sealed room of feeling he'd kept locked for so long splitting further open. You're pretty amazing, you know that? I know. You tell me all the time. Mia yawned for real this time. Can we invite her to do stuff with us sometimes? Like go to the aquarium or the river? You want that? Yeah, she seems fun, and you're less robotic when she's around. I really need to work on this robot thing everyone keeps mentioning. You really do. Mia snuggled deeper into her blankets. Night, Dad. Night, Bug. Adrian turned off her light and closed the door, then stood in the hallway feeling like he'd just navigated a significant threshold without falling apart. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Thank you for tonight. Mia is wonderful. You've done an incredible job with her. Thank you for being so patient with me, he typed back. Worth it. See you next Saturday? Actually, Adrian wrote, then paused. What he was about to suggest represented a significant deviation from routine, from the careful boundaries he'd maintained. But Mia's words echoed. Everyone can tell you like each other, so pretending you're still figuring it out is silly. What about Tuesday? He sent. There's a new exhibit at the Science Center. Mia's been asking to go. We could all go together. The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. You're inviting me to spend time with both of you? Voluntarily? Don't make fun of me. I'm not making fun. I'm just surprised. Good surprised. Then, I'd love to. What time? They made plans, and Adrian went to bed that night with the unfamiliar sensation of having actively chosen to let someone into his life, rather than just reluctantly allowing it to happen. Tuesday afternoon found the three of them at the Science Center, wandering through exhibits on ocean ecosystems, while Mia narrated facts she'd learned from her library books. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering observations that made Mia light up with the joy of finding an adult who took her interest seriously. They stopped in front of a massive aquarium tank where schools of fish moved in synchronized patterns. Did you know they do that to confuse predators? Mia said. Like, if you're trying to catch one fish and there's 100 of them all moving together, your brain can't track which one you were going after. Safety in numbers, Victoria observed. Exactly. Sometimes you're safer when you're not alone. Adrian glanced at Victoria, who was looking at him with an expression that suggested she'd caught the metaphor too. After the Science Center, they got ice cream despite it being November and too cold for it. Mia ordered mint chip and immediately started telling them about why mint chocolate chip was objectively the best flavor, backing up her argument with passionate reasoning that made both adults laugh. She's going to be a lawyer, T.A., Victoria said to Adrian while Mia was distracted by a dog walking past. Or a marine biologist who argues with people about conservation. Either way, she's got opinions, and she's not afraid to share them. I wonder where she gets that from, Adrian said pointedly. Victoria grinned. No idea. They walked Mia home as the sun started setting, the three of them falling into an easy rhythm of conversation and comfortable silence. When they reached the apartment building, Mia hugged Victoria goodbye again. Less formal this time, more familiar. Can you come to my school presentation next month? Mia asked. I'm doing one about kelp forest ecosystems, and I've been working really hard on it. Victoria glanced at Adrian, silently asking permission. He nodded. I'd love to, Victoria said. Good. It's on the 15th at 2. Dad'll send you the details. Mia waved and ran inside, leaving Adrian and Victoria alone on the sidewalk. You okay with that? Victoria asked. Me going to her school thing? Yeah, I am. This is a big step. I know. You're not freaking out? Adrian considered it. Was he freaking out? A month ago, he would have been spiraling, cataloging all the ways this could complicate things, analyzing the risks of intertwining their lives this completely. Not really, he said, surprising himself. I mean, probably I'll freak out later when I'm alone and overthinking. But right now, I'm just glad you're here. That's progress. It is. Victoria moved closer, and Adrian found himself doing the same, closing the distance between them in a way that would have felt terrifying weeks ago and now just felt right. I'm falling for you, Victoria said quietly. I should probably keep that to myself, play it cool, but I'm really bad at playing it cool. So there it is. I'm falling for you and your incredible daughter and your slowly deteriorating robot tendencies, and I thought you should know. Adrian's heart was doing something complicated in his chest, fear and joy tangled together so tightly he couldn't separate them. I'm falling for you too, he said. And it scares me, but I'm trying not to let the fear make decisions anymore. How's that going? Better than expected. Still terrifying, but better. Victoria kissed him properly this time, unhurried and certain, and Adrian let himself sink into it without immediately calculating the risks or planning his exit strategy. When they broke apart, she was smiling. Same time Saturday? She asked. Actually, Adrian said, what are you doing tomorrow night? I have a PTA meeting at 7, which is boring and terrible, but maybe we could get dinner after? You're asking me out on a school night? Apparently I am. Who are you and what have you done with Adrian Blake? I'm working on it, he said. The whole being spontaneous thing. It's a process. I can work with process. Victoria pulled out her phone. Text me when the meeting ends. I'll meet you wherever. She left, and Adrian went upstairs to find Mia already in her pajamas, working on homework at the kitchen table. Victoria's nice, she said without preamble. Yeah, she is. I'm glad you're not being weird about her anymore. Me too, Rige. Mia looked up from her math worksheet. Are you happy, Dad? The question caught Adrian completely off guard. What? You seem happy, like actually happy. Not just okay or fine or managing, happy. Adrian sat down across from her, really considering it. Was he happy? When had he last asked himself that question? Yeah, he said slowly. I think I am. Good. You deserve to be happy. So do you, Bug. I am happy. I have you and Aunt Laura and Mrs. Chen and Emma and now Victoria. Plus we're going to the aquarium soon and my kelp forest presentation is going to be amazing. What's not to be happy about? Adrian looked at his daughter, this impossibly wise, generous, well-adjusted person he'd somehow managed not to completely mess up despite his best efforts at overprotective parenting, and felt something shift fully into place. Nothing, he said. There's nothing not to be happy about. Later, after Mia was asleep, Adrian sat on the couch with his laptop and the photos from the past few weeks pulled up on the screen. River shots, images from the sculpture garden, a few candids he'd taken when Victoria wasn't paying attention. They weren't perfect. Some were poorly framed, others had technical flaws he noticed immediately. But they told a story of someone slowly remembering how to see the world as something other than a series of risks to manage. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. Can't stop thinking about what you said, about falling for me. Just wanted you to know the feeling's mutual. Adrian typed back, good, that's good, sleep well. See you tomorrow night. See you tomorrow. He went to bed that night without checking his schedule for the next day, without reviewing his task list or confirming that everything was in order for the morning. It felt reckless and uncomfortable and strangely liberating. The world didn't fall apart. In fact, when Adrian woke the next morning to find Mia already up and making breakfast while humming something off-key and cheerful, the world looked better than it had in years. 6 months after that first chaotic meeting in the cafe, Adrian found himself standing in Victoria's apartment at 3 in the morning, watching her pace while having what she called a necessary meltdown about a failed product launch that had cost her company $2 million and the resignation of her head of development. I should have seen it coming, she said for the 5th time, running her hands through already disheveled hair. The testing data was right there. The timeline was too aggressive. But I pushed anyway because I thought we could make it work through sheer force of will. And now we're hemorrhaging money and credibility and you're human, Adrian interrupted. Humans make mistakes. Victoria stopped pacing long enough to glare at him. That's not helpful. It's true, though. I don't need true right now. I need... She gestured vaguely. I don't know what I need. Adrian stood up from the couch where he'd been sitting since Victoria had called him at 2:47 a.m., her voice tight with barely controlled panic. He'd left Mia with Mrs. Chen, who'd taken this late-night emergency call with the unflappable calm of someone who'd raised 4 children of her own and driven across town to find Victoria in full crisis mode. You need to stop thinking about this for 5 minutes, he said. Your brain is in a loop. You're not solving anything, just making yourself more anxious. I can't just stop thinking about it. I know, but you can take a break from thinking about it productively and just think about it uselessly for a minute. There's a difference. Victoria looked at him like he'd lost his mind. What does that even mean? It means sit down, drink the tea I made you 20 minutes ago that's getting cold, and tell me the absolute worst-case scenario. Not the logical worst case, the catastrophic, everything goes wrong, your fears are realized worst case. Why would I do that? Because once you say it out loud, you'll realize it's not actually going to happen. And then maybe you can think clearly about what actually will happen. Victoria sat, picked up the mug of tea, wrapped her hands around it. Worst case is the board loses confidence, forces me out, and everything I've built for the past 6 years disappears. Okay, and what's the likelihood of that actually happening? Low, probably. I don't know. You do know. You're smart and you're good at what you do, and one failed product launch doesn't erase 6 years of success. Right? Logically, yes. But you don't feel logical right now, so no. I feel like I failed everyone who trusted me. My team, my investors, the patients who needed this product. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. I feel like I'm exactly what all those venture capitalists said I was when I started. Too young, too inexperienced, in over my head. Adrian moved to sit beside her on the couch. Do you remember what you told me that first night at the diner, when I was spiraling about missing Mia's conference? That you were having a human moment, not an emergency? Yeah, this is the same thing. You're having a human moment. A really big, really expensive human moment, but still just a moment. It doesn't define you unless you let it. Victoria leaned against him, exhausted. When did you become the voice of reason? Bo? About the same time you became the person who makes me want to be reasonable instead of just controlled. Adrian put an arm around her. You're allowed to feel terrible about this, but you're not allowed to convince yourself it means you're a failure. They sat in silence for a while, Victoria's breathing gradually evening out as the panic slowly receded. Thank you, she said finally, for coming, for not making me feel stupid for calling you at 3 a.m. You're not stupid, you're human. There's a difference. You keep saying that because you keep needing to hear it. Victoria pulled back to look at him. Is this what it's like? Having someone who shows up when things fall apart? I'm still figuring that out myself, but yeah, I think so. It's nice, terrifying, but nice. Welcome to my entire experience of the past 6 months. She almost smiled at that. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both absolutely terrible at letting people help us. We're getting better at it, though. Are we? You called me tonight instead of trying to handle it alone. That's progress. I guess it is. Victoria checked her phone, winced at the time. You should go. Mia has school in a few hours and you haven't slept. Neither have you. I'll try to sleep after you leave. Maybe. Victoria. I know. I know I should sleep, but my brain won't stop running scenarios and calculating damage control, and she stopped herself. See? Loop. Adrian considered his options. The responsible thing would be to go home, get a few hours of sleep, maintain the boundaries between their lives and responsibilities. But he'd spent years being responsible at the expense of being present, and he was learning that sometimes the right choice wasn't the safe one. I'm staying, he said. You don't have to do that. I know, I'm staying anyway. He texted Mrs. Chen, who responded immediately with a simple thumbs up and a message saying she'd get Mia to school. Then he guided Victoria to her bedroom, made her lie down, and sat beside her until her breathing deepened into something close to actual sleep. At 6 a.m., Adrian's phone rang. Laura, where are you? His sister demanded. Mrs. Chen just dropped Mia at school and said you were dealing with an emergency. What emergency? Victoria had a work crisis. I'm at her place. A pause. You stayed the night? Not like that. She needed someone and I stayed, that's all. Adrian Blake, voluntarily putting someone else's needs ahead of his schedule. Who are you and what have you done with my brother? Very funny. I'm serious though. You sound different. Good different. I'm tired and my back hurts from sleeping on a couch. But you stayed. That's huge. It was huge. 6 months ago, Adrian would have talked Victoria through the crisis over the phone and then gone home to his own space, his own routine, his own carefully managed life. The idea of disrupting his schedule for someone else's emotional emergency would have felt impossible. Now it just felt necessary. Yeah, he said. I stayed. When Victoria woke up around 8, she found Adrian in her kitchen making breakfast with whatever ingredients he could scrounge from her poorly stocked refrigerator. You're still here, she said, surprised. Apparently I am. Hungry? I don't think I can eat. You're eating anyway. You didn't have dinner, and you're going to have to face your board today. You need food. Eat. Victoria sat at the kitchen counter watching him cook eggs with the same methodical precision he applied to everything. You don't have to take care of me. I know. I want to. There's a difference. You keep saying that too. Because it's important for both of us. Adrian plated the eggs, added toast, set it in front of her. Eat. She ate. Not much, but enough that Adrian stopped worrying she'd pass out during her afternoon meeting. I'm sorry about last night, Victoria said, for falling apart on you. Don't apologize for being human. There you go again with the human thing. I'm committed to the theme. Adrian poured coffee. What time's your meeting? 2. I have 4 hours to figure out how to tell my board that I made a $2 million mistake without getting fired. You're not going to get fired. You don't know that. I know you. I know you're going to walk into that meeting with a plan for how to fix this, and you're going to own the mistake without letting it define you. And they're going to remember why they trusted you in the first place. Victoria looked at him over her coffee mug. You have a lot of faith in me. Yeah, I do. Why? Because I've watched you show up for Mia's school presentations and my photography exhibits and all the tiny mundane moments of my life with the same intensity you bring to running a company. Someone who cares that much about the small things doesn't fail at the big things. They just hit obstacles and find ways around them. Something shifted in Victoria's expression, vulnerability replacing the professional mask she'd been trying to construct. I love you, she said quietly. I know we haven't said that yet, but I do. And you should know before I go into this meeting that might end my career. Adrian's heart did something complicated. They'd been dancing around this for weeks, both of them clearly feeling it, but neither wanting to be the first to speak it into existence. I love you too, he said, and felt the truth of it settle into his bones. And your career's not ending, but if it did, you'd build something else. That's who you are. Victoria crossed the kitchen and kissed him, tasting like coffee and gratitude and something that felt like hope. Thank you, she said against his mouth, for staying, for showing up, for being exactly what I needed when I didn't even know what that was. Same, Adrian said. You did that for me first. But the board meeting didn't end Victoria's career. She walked in with a detailed recovery plan, owned the mistake without making excuses, and emerged 3 hours later exhausted but employed. Adrian knew because she texted him immediately. Still have a job. Barely. Tell you everything tonight? My place. 7. Bring wine. Done. That evening, with Mia already asleep and Victoria curled up on his couch with her second glass of wine, Adrian listened to her recount the meeting in careful detail. The hard questions, the tense moments, the eventual grudging acceptance that mistakes happen even to talented CEOs. I kept thinking about what you said, Victoria told him, about being human. And when they asked how I was going to prevent this from happening again, I told them the truth, that I can't prevent it completely because I'm human and humans make judgment errors. But I could build better systems to catch those errors before they become $2 million problems. What did they say? They said that was the most honest answer they'd heard in a board meeting in years. She laughed, slightly bitter. Apparently honesty is novel in corporate settings. How do you feel? Tired, relieved, still kind of scared. Victoria set down her wine glass. But also grateful. For you, for how you showed up last night. I've never had that before. Had what? Someone who just came when I needed them. No questions, no judgment, just showed up. She looked at him. Is this what it's like for you? With Mia? Yeah, mostly. Except she doesn't usually call me at 3 a.m. about failed product launches. Give her a few years. They sat together in comfortable silence, the kind that had become familiar over months of shared moments both significant and mundane. I've been thinking, Victoria said eventually, about what comes next. For us. Adrian felt anxiety spike automatically, then forced himself to breathe through it. Okay. I don't want to pressure you, but I also don't want to pretend I'm okay with things staying casual forever. Things haven't felt casual in a while. No, they haven't. Victoria turned to face him. I want more of this. More of us. I want to fall asleep next to you and wake up with you and not have to coordinate schedules just to see each other. I want to be part of Mia's daily life, not just weekend visits and special occasions. I want— Me too, Adrian interrupted. You do? Yeah, I've been thinking about it too. About what it would look like if we stopped keeping our lives separate and actually built something together. Ma'am. And it scares me, but I want it anyway. Victoria's smile was soft, relieved. So what do we do about it? I don't know. Figure it out together? That's not much of a plan. I'm working on being okay with not having all the answers in advance. How's that going? Terribly. But I'm trying. Victoria laughed, reached for his hand. We could start slow. Maybe I stay over more often. Meet you and Mia for breakfast sometimes. Stop treating our relationship like it's separate from the rest of our lives. That sounds good, manageable. Very you. Is that a bad thing? No, it's exactly right. Victoria squeezed his hand. I love that you need to process things carefully. I love that you make lists and plans and think through every angle. I just don't want you to think yourself out of something good because you're too busy preparing for it to fail. Adrian knew she was right. He'd spent 6 years preparing for failure, building safeguards and maintaining distance, and the only thing it had accomplished was making him lonely. Okay, he said. Let's do it. Not slow, just real. All in. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. 3 months later, Victoria spent Christmas morning in Adrian's apartment, watching Mia tear through presents with the barely contained enthusiasm of a 9-year-old who'd received the marine biology encyclopedia set she'd been requesting for months. Laura was there too, along with Mrs. Chen and her husband, and the small space felt full in the best possible way. This is nice, Victoria said quietly to Adrian, while Mia explained to Mrs. Chen's husband why octopuses were the most intelligent invertebrates. Yeah, it is. Very different from my Christmases growing up. How so? Quieter, more formal. My mother hosted elaborate dinner parties where everyone performed politeness. This is better. Chaotic family gatherings are better than elegant parties? When the chaos comes from people who actually like each other. Absolutely. Mia bounded over, holding up the encyclopedia. Victoria, did you know that some octopuses can change both their color and their texture? Like, they can make themselves look bumpy or smooth depending on what they're trying to blend into. I did not know that. That's amazing. Right? Nature is so cool. Mia hugged the book to her chest. Thank you for the tide pool field guide. Dad said you picked it out specially. I did. I thought you might like it for your aquarium trip next month. I love it. You're really good at presents. After Mia had returned to showing off her gifts to Mrs. Chen, Laura cornered Adrian in the kitchen. So, she said, you look happy. I am happy. Like, genuinely happy, not just managing to cope happy. Is there a difference? You know there is. Laura grabbed a cookie from the plate on the counter. I'm proud of you, you know, for letting her in, for letting yourself have this. You were right about the blind date. I'm always right. You should know this by now. Laura smiled. She's good for you, and you're good for her. It's nice to see. That night, after everyone had left and Mia was asleep surrounded by new books and stuffed marine animals, Adrian and Victoria sat together on the couch in the dim glow of the Christmas tree lights. Thank you, Victoria said, for including me today, for making me part of this. Thank you for wanting to be part of it. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Adrian turned to look at her, this woman who'd crashed into his life barefoot and muddy and proceeded to systematically dismantle every defense mechanism he'd spent years constructing. She'd pushed him to take pictures again, to want things for himself, to believe that being vulnerable didn't automatically mean being destroyed. Move in with us, Hua, he said. Victoria's eyes widened. What? Well, move in. Your lease is up in 2 months anyway, and you're here more often than you're at your own place. It makes sense. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. I'm not good at romantic, but I'm good at practical, and practically speaking, we're already living together. We're just doing it inefficiently across 2 apartments. And emotionally speaking? Oh, yeah. Adrian took a breath. Emotionally speaking, I want you here. Every morning, every evening. I want Mia to have you as a constant instead of a visitor. I want to build a life with you, not just coordinate schedules. That's better. Victoria was smiling now. But what about Mia? Have you talked to her about this? Not specifically, but she keeps asking when you're coming over next and leaving space for you at dinner and introducing you to her friends as her dad's girlfriend who knows a lot about science. I think she'd be okay with it. You think or you know? I think. But we could ask her. They did ask her the next morning over pancakes. Mia's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Obviously, yes. Why didn't you ask me sooner? She pointed her fork at Adrian. This is exactly what I've been saying about you being weird and overthinking things. I wasn't overthinking. I was being considerate of your feelings. My feelings are that Victoria should have been living here already. She's here all the time anyway, and her apartment is too big for one person and doesn't have good light for drawing. Mia turned to Victoria. You're staying, right? If your dad and I can figure out the logistics, yeah, I'm staying. Good, that's settled then. Mia returned to her pancakes like they hadn't just made a major life decision over breakfast. Laura's response when Adrian told her later was equally enthusiastic, though significantly more sarcastic. Look at you, making big spontaneous life decisions without a 5-year plan and a backup strategy. Who are you? I'm working on it, Adrian said. You really are. I'm impressed. Victoria moved in 6 weeks later, bringing with her an alarming amount of books, a collection of medical equipment she swore was essential, and a willingness to negotiate closet space that Adrian appreciated more than he could articulate. The transition was messier than he'd anticipated. Arguments about whose furniture to keep, adjustments to routines that had been established over years, moments when the reality of sharing space with another adult felt overwhelming. But there were also mornings when Adrian woke up to find Victoria and Mia already up and working on some project together, and evenings when all three of them cooked dinner while Mia narrated facts about deep-sea creatures, and quiet moments when Victoria reached for his hand across the couch, and he realized this was what home was supposed to feel like. On a Tuesday evening in late spring, almost exactly 1 year after that first date, Adrian found himself back at Riverside Cafe with Victoria. They'd returned occasionally over the months, partly out of nostalgia and partly because they both liked the nachos. Do you remember what you were thinking that first day? Victoria asked. When I walked in, covered in mud? That you were chaos incarnate and I should leave immediately. But you didn't. No, I stayed an extra 10 minutes to be polite and ended up staying for 2 hours because you were interesting. Just interesting? Terrifying and interesting. The combination was compelling. Victoria laughed. I thought you were going to bolt when I suggested we split nachos. You had this expression like I'd suggested we rob a bank together. Sharing food with a stranger felt more dangerous than it should have. And now? Adrian looked at her across the table, this woman who taught him the difference between control and safety, between being scared and being careful, between surviving and actually living. Now, I can't imagine not sharing everything with you, he said. That's very sweet. Also very unlike you. I'm working on it. You keep saying that because it's still true. I'm always going to be someone who thinks too much and plans too carefully and needs time to process change. But I'm learning that those things don't have to stop me from being happy, from being present. Victoria reached across the table for his hand. You know what I've learned? What? That the right person doesn't show up perfect. They show up muddy and late and completely wrong for the moment, and somehow that becomes exactly right. Adrian thought about that first day, about his conviction that Victoria represented everything he needed to avoid, about how close he'd come to walking away before she'd even arrived, how many times he'd almost ended things because fear felt safer than hope. I'm glad you stopped to save that dog, he said. Me too, even if it meant showing up to a date looking like I'd lost a fight with a swamp. They finished their nachos and walked out into the evening air. Spring had arrived properly now, warm enough that Mia had started campaigning for weekend trips to the beach. Victoria wanted to take her to Monterey, to the aquarium Mia had been talking about for months. Adrian was already researching hotels and making mental lists of logistics while simultaneously trying to let go enough to allow room for spontaneity. It was a work in progress. He was a work in progress, but standing there with Victoria's hand in his, thinking about the life they were building together, messy and imperfect, and nothing like the carefully controlled, existence he'd maintained for years. Adrian realized something that had taken him far too long to understand. Safety wasn't found in controlling every variable and eliminating every risk. Safety was found in trusting that even when things fell apart, someone would be there to help pick up the pieces. In knowing that being vulnerable didn't mean being weak, and that letting people close enough to hurt you also meant letting them close enough to help you heal. Rebecca had left because he'd tried to make their relationship fit into the rigid structure he'd built to protect himself. He'd learned the wrong lesson from that. Not that he needed to be more flexible, but that he needed to be more controlled. It had taken 6 years and a woman covered in pond mud to show him the difference. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked as they walked to the car. "How much time I wasted being scared." "You weren't wasting time. You were protecting yourself. There's a difference. You sound like me now. We're rubbing off on each other. It's what happens when you actually let someone in." When they got home, they found Mia and Mrs. Chen on the couch, deep in a documentary about coral reefs. Mia barely looked up when they entered, too absorbed in the footage of reef sharks hunting at night. "Did you know, she said without taking her eyes off the screen, that coral reefs only cover 0.2% of the ocean floor, but support 25% of all marine species?" "I did not know that," Victoria said, sitting down beside her. "It's because they provide structure. Like the coral itself creates an ecosystem where everything else can live. Structure enables life." Adrian caught Victoria's eye over Mia's head. She was smiling, and he knew they were both thinking the same thing, that structure wasn't the enemy of spontaneity, that planning and flexibility could coexist, that you could build something solid without making it rigid. Later, after Mia had gone to bed and Mrs. Chen had left, Adrian and Victoria stood together in the kitchen doing dishes. It was mundane, domestic, exactly the kind of ordinary moment Adrian used to think represented the boring parts of life that had to be endured between more significant events. Now he understood that these were the moments that mattered, not the grand gestures or dramatic turning points, but the quiet accumulation of shared experiences that built a life worth living. "I love this," Victoria said, handing him a plate to dry. "Doing dishes? Being here with you and Mia, building something real. Me too. Think we'll still be doing this in 20 years? Standing in a kitchen doing dishes and talking about coral reefs? I hope so." "That's very optimistic coming from you." "I'm working on it," Adrian said again. And this time they both laughed, because the truth was, he was working on it. Every day in small ways and sometimes in large ones, he was choosing to stay open instead of closing down, to lean in instead of pulling away, to trust that the risk of being hurt was worth the reward of being fully alive. It wasn't easy. Some days he still wanted to retreat into schedules and control, to manage every variable and eliminate every uncertainty. But he had Victoria to remind him that control was an illusion, and Mia to show him that the best things in life often came from embracing the unexpected. That first Tuesday afternoon, sitting in a cafe waiting for a blind date he didn't want, Adrian had been seconds away from leaving. Convinced that safety meant staying closed off, that protection required distance, that the only way to avoid being hurt was to never let anyone close enough to matter. If he'd left, he would have missed everything. The muddy entrance, the honest conversations, the slow dismantling of walls he'd built so carefully. He would have missed Victoria teaching him the difference between fear and caution, Mia showing him that his daughter was stronger than he'd given her credit for, and both of them proving that love wasn't about control. It was about choosing to stay even when staying felt terrifying. Standing in his kitchen with soap suds on his hands and the woman he loved beside him, Adrian understood that the moment he'd almost chosen safety had actually been the moment he'd almost lost everything that made his life complete. But he hadn't left. He'd stayed just a little longer, just long enough to see what might happen. And what happened was everything he'd been too afraid to hope for. Sometimes the things we're most afraid of are exactly what we need most. Sometimes the person who feels like chaos is actually the one who teaches us how to breathe. And sometimes the scariest choice, the one that requires us to be vulnerable and open and willing to risk being hurt, is the one that leads us home. Adrian Blake had spent 6 years believing that safety meant never taking chances, never letting his guard down, never allowing himself to want more than mere survival. It had taken one extraordinary woman and one ordinary afternoon to show him what he'd been missing. And every day since, he'd been learning what it meant to truly live.